Welcome everyone to episode 23 of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. The podcast where sucking at fishing is okay.
When being terrible at your hobby is the average.
This is actually a really cool episode. I've noticed the last few episodes we've just been like frog fishing for bass, flipping for bass, like certain things. So I thought it'd be cool to change it up a little bit and not really do a specific topic. I thought we could just do like a Q&A.
All right.
How do you feel about that?
Okay. I like Q&A.
So I put a story on Instagram.
The AOA Q&A. This is the second one.
Number 2.
Yep.
Oh, sweet. Back by popular demand. Actually, no one demanded it, but it's back. But anyway, I put a story up on the Instagram and I said, Q&A, ask us anything fishing related. So you have to say fishing related or else all these weirdos will send you like weird questions. But
and then we got to go through them and be like, well, I'm not answering that on, live podcast radio stuff.
So we actually have over 35 questions.
That's awesome.
So I thought we could just go through these. And before we get into the interesting fishing fact, we're just going to do one question. I'll kind of, give you the one I know you'd like to answer, and I'll do the one I'd like to answer. And then we can just talk off each one.
Okay.
But just as a little teaser for this episode, if you're listening, there's a lot of different topics from bass, salmon, muskie, walleye, a bunch of different stuff. So I'm looking forward to this because I really like when our listeners actually send us in stuff so we can interact with them. And some people find our opinions slightly interesting, so it's always good to have. But before we get into that...
They may not be intelligent, but they're interesting.
But they're opinions. But before we get into that, we have, as tradition states, the interesting fishing fact of the week. And for that, we have the one and only man with a mustache, Tom Sullick. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Yeah,
Andrew.
I don't drive a friend's Ferrari.
Okay. All right, so this better be good, because I think last week we didn't even have an interesting fishing fact. It was a TTT.
No, last week we did have an interesting fishing fact.
What was it?
Well, it was about the Great Lakes. About what monsters or what,
you know what?
You
if you remember about what was it?
The testicle, the ball nipper.
The reason I forgot that is because I tried to block that out because it was so disgusting. If you haven't listened to last week, definitely listen to last week, and you will literally hate us for that.
I can't promise that this one is as exciting.
Okay.
But
that's hard to live up to.
It is interesting. For me, I found this super interesting because I know that you and I have kind of experienced this phenomenon. Just you say the last N. I don't even know how to say it.
If you're old enough to get that reference, how's your back doing this morning?
That's the Muppet episode 1, season 1.
From what, like
the Muppet Show, like the original The Muppet Show.
Yeah.
So
if you're old enough to know that,
I love that series.
We can be friends. But anyway, all right. Interesting fishing fact. Go.
So, have you ever seen? You have to stop drinking there. I have a question for you.
Oh, I'm so parched.
Glub, glub. Water tastes good.
I'm drinking a fish's home right now.
I wanted to pee in it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, another callback.
I'm hoping Pure Life filtered their water, but probably not. All right,
you can't say brands. You have to bleep that out. Okay. So have you ever seen a tide?
Like in the ocean?
Yeah. You've seen tides coming out?
Yeah, of course.
Have you ever seen a tide on the Great Lakes?
No.
Have you ever seen water levels fluctuate within a day, though? And you thought, that's kind of weird. Like, I know there's not a tide. But
I have.
Like, you've seen the water.
I used to fish a harbor quite a bit. And I remember, like, in the summer when it was dry, you'd see the water level on, like, the rocks. It was dry. And then sometimes the water would just either go up or down a few inches. And you're like, what the heck? Yeah. That's weird.
I was fishing one harbor, and the water was high in general in the lake. And so the water I was on the dock part of in the harbor, and the water is moored right to the concrete pier portion of it. And as the water was rising, it would rise like a couple centimeters above the dock level. And then it would like dip down after like an hour. And it would be like a couple inches below the dock. So you think it was a 2x8 or 2x6 on the edge of the dock. Like that was 8 inches of fluctuation that was happening there. And I thought, I know there's no tide, but like, what is this? So I figured it out. I figured it out. Like, I did some research, and it's called a seiche, spelled S-E-I-C-H-E, but you call it a seiche. So a seiche is a standing wave oscillating in a body of water. So a seiche can form in any enclosed body of water. So generally, I would refer to it like as an example. If you're like, you get in a tub and the water like sloshes back and forth, or like in a bowl, anything like that, you have in an enclosed space, the water's like goes to one side and that wave returns back.
Okay.
Right? So that is a seiche. And what will happen is on these big lakes, the bigger the lake, it can have even more dramatic effects. When strong winds and or rapid pressure changes on the other side of the lake, they'll push the water down or push it to the side of the lake. And then when those winds or that pressure stops or moves on, it'll actually rebound back to the other side of the lake. And that seiche can actually continue on for hours or even days after the fact. It just continues to kind of rock back and forth in the lake.
Interesting.
So that's why even if it's a nice calm day, and it might not even be a storm across the lake, but maybe there's a big one like 2 days ago, and it's still just moving from that. So if you, what's interesting is if you combine ideal like underwater structure in a lake with a powerful storm that happened, you can get insane results. So one of the Great Lakes that is very well known for it is Lake Erie. It has some of the most pronounced like seiche events ever. In 1844, a 22-foot wave, which is mixed by a cause of a storm causing a seiche, and then also that storm moving across, then pushing, like, creating those waves even larger. So a 22-foot wave broke over a 14-foot seawall and killed 78 people. It also pushed the ice and dammed the ice so bad that Niagara Falls stopped flowing.
Wow.
Like this is like, that's 1844. And it's like, yeah, that's a long time ago, but that's an insane like wave. Now in 2008, there was waves ranging from 12 to 16 feet tall that caused a lot of like major flooding in Buffalo. That's 2008. Same thing. Lake Erie, 12 to 16 feet caused by the seiche that's rocking and just building and building. Now going into waves in general. So again, you get the biggest waves on the inland lakes when they're caused by the seiche that's coming, and it just happens to like work really well with the storm that's like pushing the wave as well. So kind of creating a second seiche on top of what's already fluctuating, if that makes sense.
Double.
So I was just curious, the largest wave ever recorded on a freshwater lake. Take a guess as to what lake it was. It's not Lake Erie.
Okay.
Can't guess that.
I want to say Lake Superior.
It's Lake Superior,
okay,
which I believe is, one of the biggest, if not the biggest freshwater lake. The amount of water in that thing's insane.
Yeah.
So it was in October 24th of 2017.
Wow.
That's pretty recent. It was 8.7 meters tall. That's 28 and a half feet. A single wave. So that's measured from the top of the wave to the bottom of the trough that kind of follows it. And so the full height of, if you were in a boat and you hit the bottom of that wave and you look up, you've got essentially a 2-story building of water just like pushing towards you.
That's insane.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Oh.
So yeah, that happened just north of Marquette, Michigan. Michigan is known in that area for a lot of guys do surfing and stuff like that, especially in the wintertime when there's like high winds and storms. But that area is known for big waves. But that has been in the world record for the largest wave in a freshwater lake.
That's insane. Man, if I saw like a 5-foot wave coming at me, I'd be capsized.
I've been paddling in about 2-foot waves, and like it's terrifying. I can't imagine being on like any vessel with a 28-foot wave coming at me. Like,
well, you wouldn't have to imagine for long because you'd probably be dead.
Yeah, so that's a keeping in mind if anyone says, "Oh, I've seen the tides in the lakes," like actually, it's most likely a seiche.
A seiche. Word of the day is a seiche.
Not a seiche, just seiche. It is a
seiche.
Yeah.
That was interesting. I'll give you a interesting rating of a B+ for that.
Okay.
No. I'll give you an A-.
Yay.
A-.
I thought you were going to start rating me weird. I give you 2 beavers out of a loony. I'm like, what?
Well, I think I gave you a B+1/2 one time. So this is an A-. No, that was interesting because that is something that I have noticed that I never knew. And that's the whole point of this interesting fishing fact is like sometimes, there are more funny facts, but a lot of the facts are like things that maybe you had no idea. And that is something I literally had no idea.
Yeah. It's cool to find the scientific explanation to stuff that like we just I've traditionally never understood before.
All I know is that every interesting fishing fact that Andrew has done recently has been terrifying. And again, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, I highly recommend it. And I highly recommend plugging your ears during Andrew's interesting fishing fact about the fish that likes to nip on.
I recommend turning up the volume and just blasting your eardrums with whatever I have to say.
Please don't. All right, that was interesting. Thanks, Andrew. So we are going to get into AOA Q&A.
Episode I just want to address, if you hear us drinking a lot during this episode,
this
is like one of the hottest days of the year.
Yeah.
And the air conditioning in the studio doesn't work like super well. So
yeah. Don't judge us. We're drinking water.
Yeah, it's iced drinks.
All right. So AOA Q&A, episode 2. I'm excited. This is interesting because there's so many random questions. and a lot of, okay, if you sent us a question, thanks so much. We are not going to be able to get to all of these, but we see your questions. But we're going to start off with just one that we answer every single time I say Q&A. Someone says this, Daiwa versus Shimano. Oh, but this one is Daiwa versus Shimano versus Luz. Now, that being said, I've never actually owned a Luz reel. They're not as popular in Ontario, I've noticed. In the States, if you go to
They are gaining popularity everywhere. For sure.
But all of our local shops don't carry them.
Yeah.
So I've never used a Luz. I hear good things about them. I'd like to try one day, but for me, Daiwa and Shimano.
For most reels you're paying like a decent price point for, no matter the brand, they're going to be a solid reel.
They're going to be good, yeah.
So kind of discussing between Daiwa and Shimano, like we talked about before, because they actually design and manufacture their own products, they generally have better technology or more updated technology in the reels that are being released that year.
And quality control.
And the other companies, they're getting made by aftermarket manufacturers, essentially. Between the two, I think for the price point, Daiwa, you can get more
bang for your buck.
Yeah, than Shimano. Not to say like Shimano, amazing reels, 100%. But if I had $250 to spend on a reel, I could get something that would perform better for a $250 Daiwa reel than a $250 Shimano reel, in my opinion.
Yeah. So my thought is Daiwa, you get better performance. And I'm not talking about like Shimano or Daiwa's like $600-$700 reels. I'm just talking about a reel that a normal average Joe would buy.
Someone who likes the hobby and is starting to put a bit more money into their gear.
Yeah. Or like a guy even that fishes tournaments. But like I feel like Daiwa, you get better bang for your buck. I do feel that Shimano's for the money are workhorses and probably will last longer. Like I have Shimano reels that are old, like the old Stratics with the wooden handles, like old, and they're still fine. So both great reels. Like Andrew said, any reel these days is pretty good. Like I would be more than happy to fish almost any brand of reel. Yep. Doesn't really matter. Fish don't care what you're holding.
I've liked my Abu Garcias that I've owned.
And again, I always say to everyone, go to the store, go to the tackle shop, feel them in your hands. Some guys are like, I don't like the feeling of a Daiwa, or I don't like the feeling of a Shimano.
Is that for reels or rods as well? Because
I'm assuming
reels.
I'm assuming reels because Luz. Yeah, I guess Luz makes rods.
For rods as well, like Jesse says, if you go to the shop, grab one and see what it feels in your hand, because there are times when I opt for, let's say I have a $300 budget for a rod, and I'm like, this one is nice, it's $300, it feels really good, but this one over here, this has like the feel that I want in my rod, but it only costs $200 or $150. It's like, okay, but I prefer the feel of it more. That's the one I'll buy. It doesn't have to cost more. You want to get the best usability out of your gear.
Exactly. And a good example of that is the Daiwa Tatula XT rods.
Yeah.
They are $120. They feel like $200.
Yeah.
And like I bought one over a more expensive rod because it felt better and the value of it was insane. So again, moral of the story, go to the shops, feel it with your own hands and go with that. Go with what feels good for you. All right, we'll do this one quick.
We have to do better at answering these questions faster.
That was a good one. But, okay, we're going to go quick from now on.
Okay.
All right. What's your bucket list fish?
Arctic grayling or Arctic char.
Okay. Interesting. They're beautiful fish.
Yeah.
I think for me, let's stay in Canada here. So Arctic.
They're Canada.
Arctic char or Arctic grayling?
They're kind of, I would say, grayling has like some weird hold on me. I really want to catch a grayling.
For me, bucket list fish for me would be, I've always wanted to catch a striped bass.
Yeah.
Like one of those big ones like on the shore, like in the ocean
or something like that.
Chucking out huge like poppers or something. I think that'd be sick. Like a big 20 plus pound striper would be sick.
Yeah.
All right.
Which they do move into fresh water. So anyone's saying, that's a saltwater fish. But like, yeah, guess what? So we're salmon. We catch those.
Speaking of the surf, Last Cast Canada asks, asks this question. Have you ever been surf fishing down south, launch bait out, and then relax on the beach? Have you?
I tried once to no success.
Yeah.
I was pretty young. We went to Bass Pro Shops. We were in Florida. I went to Bass Pro Shops because I didn't bring any stuff down there, but we had time. I'm like, Dad, I want to go fishing. So we talked to a guy who's fishing off the pier, and I went, bought a surf rod, the cheapest one I could find at Bass Pro Shops. I had line on it already, and I went, got some harnesses for fishing dead squid.
Yeah.
Went to the store, bought some frozen squid. You thaw them out, put them on a hook, cast out. I didn't catch anything, but that was my first experience ever saltwater fishing.
Yeah, I've gone once. I went on an anniversary trip to South Carolina, and we went to the bait. I brought a rod. I had like this 4-piece surf rod that I bought at like the spring fishing show like years ago. 4-piece, then a bait feeder, like one of my carp reels. And I was like, all right, I'll go. And I went to the bait shop, and they were all like, oh man, I wish you guys came next month because that's when all these flounder come in. And I was like, and they're like, oh, just cast those. So I bought some. They gave me some like just basic rigs, like sinkers and a hook, and then I bought some shrimp.
Shrimp or I thought it was sand fleas.
Sand fleas as well, but I bought shrimp too, and I actually caught a little baby shark, which is pretty cool. I would like to do it in the future.
Buttered the story up. I caught a shark right
from
shore.
A huge 14-inch long.
I was scared of getting bit and like losing a toenail.
It was very cool though, because sharks have such weird texture that you would not expect if you'd never touched one before.
I have a fun fact about sharks and their texture.
Okay.
That's what they used to use for sandpaper back in the day, was shark skin. Because it's rough, because it's not actually scales, it's small like conical, like I don't know, like weird hard keratin that grows on their skin. Like it's actually like the shark skin, it doesn't have scales on it. It's the skin texture.
Very interesting. All right.
I was obsessed with sharks growing up as a child.
Oh, I know. He had shark posters all over in his bedroom. So this one I thought we could go a little bit in depth about because this guy here, Thorburn the Fifth, he asked this question a few times.
I don't even know what their name, but I'm like picturing some guy be like, yes, I'm Thornburg the Fifth. I have a question about your... like,
he's probably some rich guy. Now he's offended. Just kidding.
Sorry, send us money.
Anyway, he sent us this question. What are the advantages or disadvantages of a bait caster over a spinning reel? And we're just going to talk about general purpose fishing in Ontario. The advantages... Let's go with advantages. What are the advantages of a bait caster over a spinning reel?
You get to stop and smell the roses constantly because you're taking out backlashes. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Accuracy,
no line twist.
Accuracy. Okay, no line twist.
That's my biggest one for me, is no line twist.
Because we were just talking about this. Because a spinning reel spins line onto your reel and it spins as it comes off.
It comes off the reel straight. And when you reel in, it's actually spinning it as it turns it onto the spool.
So it does twist your line.
A bait caster feeds it straight off and it feeds it straight back on. Yeah. There's no twist.
So spinning reels, you will get some line twist. It's not as bad, especially if you use braided line.
Yeah. I go for a weekend trip though, and I'm casting a spinning rod all weekend long. End of the weekend, it's annoying as heck. Like it's just constantly twisting on me. Yeah.
Advantages of a spinning rod are, generally speaking, and we're not going to bring really BFS into this because that's more of an expensive subgenre, which is bait finesse, bait casting equipment. Spinning rods generally can cast smaller baits. Like if you're fishing smaller baits or jigs or more delicate baits like live bait where you can't really, if you cast too hard, the minnow rips off or something like that. So it's more delicate. Yeah. Spinning reels have better drags.
If you're bobber fishing, you're going to use a spinning rod. Like
100%. Yeah, spinning reels have better drags. That's why generally when you see people fishing light line techniques, generally they're using spinning reels with light line so they can have that good drag. Especially you see the guys
smooth drag.
Yeah, they're fishing smallmouth on like the Bassmaster right now on the St. Lawrence. Well, last week it is. And they're using, spinning rods, super light line, really big, like 3,000-4,000 size reels with buttery smooth drags, just because they, you hook a big 6-7 pound smallmouth on a legit tiny thin hook on a drop shot. You need that thing to be smooth as a baby's butt.
Yeah.
I assume that's what the saying is. So, but the advantages of using a bait caster, you get way more torque. Yeah. So if you're winching fish out of heavy cover, out of lily pads, bait caster's the way to go.
Yeah.
All right, here's a good question. How do you get out of a slump? A fishing slump, I assume.
Switch to BFS. Go to a Ned rig.
Yeah.
And start fishing finesse rigs, I would say. Because first of all, you're gonna locate some smaller fish. 100%. You're gonna be catching panfish, you're gonna be catching small bass, whatever. But at least you're finding out where the forage is. So chances are there are bass still in that area that you're trying to catch, and you're going to have to weed through a lot of small guys, small little fish, but the chances are they're not aggressively feeding, so you bump down into more of a finesse approach. You're going to be catching a lot more quantity of fish, and if you keep at it, you can actually still get quality mixed in with that.
Yeah.
That'd be my suggestion.
And I would say sometimes you may get into a slump because you're trying to force a technique to work that it's not ideal. So a lot of times, one of the main techniques I feel like people force is frog fishing.
Yeah.
They'll be like, it's summertime, lily pads, it's, and they're casting frogs. And sometimes the fish don't want a frog.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, I
There's
fished
a storm the day before.
I fished all day and didn't get a single blow up. It's like, yeah, because they didn't want a frog. You should have tried something else. Yeah. So my advice would be, if you're in a slump for any species, go back to the basics of what generally works. Say you're musky fishing and you're trying different things. Go back to that bucktail. Just the thing that you know is going to work, and just keep fishing. Fish spots where you know there's fish. It's hard to get... It's hard when you're fishing for, say, like a specific fish. Say you're fishing for a trophy muskie and you're fishing big baits and you're in a slump. Hey, drop down the size of the bait and go catch a 35-inch muskie. Get your confidence back, then go back out for the big one. Yeah. It does happen. It happened to me more than a few times over the years, where you're just so focused on one thing and it's not working for you for whatever reason. Maybe you only get, a week off of work the summer. And you go out, and that particular week just
or it happens you go out like 4 times in a row, but it happens to be it's always after a storm or something like that. Like you're fishing the worst times, and it feels like it's on you. It's not. It honestly could be an unfortunate coincidence of circumstances that are just not in your favor. Yeah. So and also do whatever you can to like to go back to basics. Go to where use what you have confidence in. Go to where you have confidence in, and give it your best shot.
And have a fishing friend that sucks. That really helps. Makes you feel good.
Just make sure it's not their first time, or else they will 100% outfish you.
Yeah, beginner's luck. Yeah. All right, here's a good question. Effective ways to target bass in a pond that has gotten muddy. And this is from Peter Wolf. And he also says, I love the pod. Keep up the fantastic work. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
All right, so pond, river, lake, doesn't matter. Muddy water, dark colors. You have to think, the fish has to be able to find your bait. Mm-hmm. If it's muddy, you're going to want something noisy or something that has a lot of vibration. Yeah. So if it's a very weedy pond, even if it's really muddy and there's surface vegetation, check out a black frog on the top. Or if there's not a lot of surface vegetation, a black buzzbait, just something that just churns water, a whopper plop or something
subsurface,
that's noisy.
You've got a chatterbait, you've got like a rattling rap. Use a crankbait that has a lot of like good rattles, or a hot and tot, depending how deep it is.
Or a big bulky jig with a big bulky trailer, like dark, like black and blue,
something with like a thumping tail, or like craws that are like really like ripping down, because they'll pick it up on their lateral line. Movement in the water, especially in a pond. The other thing too I would suggest is, if you are fishing slower presentations, scent. I know a lot of guys say like scent's not a big deal, but especially if it's a pond, it's not washing everything away from your bait. It's going to kind of leach away from your casting area, so that might. It can be an advantage
for sure. So again, you're going to want to make some noise and disturbance. And bass are very, very aware of their surroundings. So even if the water's legit chocolate milk, they can still find your bait. It does make it more difficult, but it's not impossible. So don't worry. Sometimes you'll go to a river sometimes after a big rain, and it just gets super murky, and you're just like, oh man, this is going to be tough, but you can still catch fish.
The thing is, I've caught so many fish, like not just walleye because they can see really well at night or in low light conditions, but like bass, which don't have anything exceptional about their eyesight, and it'll be fishing overcast, a moonless, dark night. Like there's no stars in the sky. It's completely black outside, and I'll just fish like a jerkbait underwater at middle of the night, and you'll still catch fish because they're picking it up. Yeah. They can find it, they can locate it accurately and hit it. So, and
a lot of these fish, they feed almost exclusively at night during the summer. So they're used to hunting fish and bait fish and frogs and all that kind of stuff at night with very little vision.
I would say if it's the less visibility there is in the water, two things happen. One, they're relying more on the other senses to locate fish. They can't rely on eyesight, obviously. So use things that, like we said, have more vibration, have disturbance in the water.
Here's an interesting one from Long Branch 1943. He says, not a question. I just want to thank you guys for putting out a great podcast. Found you last week. Thanks, man. All right. Here's a good one from Nick. He says, Why can't I catch fish in the summer when water temps are over 70 degrees in southern Ontario? It gets tough in the summer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
We all know that, well, bass, if we're talking about bass, like I don't know what he's talking about.
I hope it's not musky.
Yeah. A lot of fish are easier to catch early season and late season when they're just feeding up. Sometimes in the summer when it gets really hot, it can get hard to catch certain species of fish. Like, for instance, walleye in the middle of the dead heat of the summer, they're hard to find.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it is. Like, I know some guys can go out there and find walleye in the middle of summer, but when it's easy to find them, they're easy to catch.
Yeah.
For me anyway. It's like, oh, in the spring, you can catch walleye, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like 30 something degrees out. And it just seems they just spread out in the weeds, and you're like, well, I don't know where they are. It's just because they're so spread out. It's not because you're bad at fishing. So definitely sometimes like during the year, like I'll be like, I have to fish for a different species than I would like to just because of the weather. Like we don't particularly target muskie.
Go for catfish.
Yeah, we don't target muskie in the heat because you're not really supposed to because they don't revive as well.
Yeah.
We're going to target, say, largemouth instead. When it cools down a bit, we'll go back to muskie. So my advice would be, depending on whatever species you're talking about, is maybe if it's really hot and it's just not ideal to catch that particular fish. We live in Ontario. There's tons of fish in Ontario. Just target another fish.
And to locate, the other thing I'll mention there is if you're trying to locate fish in the hot temperatures, if you have a fish finder, depth finder, whatever, electronics on your boat that can read the water temperature, keep an eye on it as you're moving around because there might be, in your lake, check out river mouths. Oftentimes river mouths, even just a small creek coming out, maybe it's spring fed, and the spring fed water is really cold, and that water could be 2 degrees cooler in that area, or the shady side of the lake, or
under the lily pads.
Yeah, something with like a sand bottom would reflect a lot more light than something that has like a dark bottom. So keeping an eye on finding an area, under lily pads, stuff like that, stuff that it might be 2 degrees cooler in that area, in the fish's habitat, not just the surface of the water. That could be the big difference on locating your fish and where they might be feeding a bit more better.
Exactly. All right, here is another interesting question. This is a hard one, but Anton says, do you prefer boat fishing or bank fishing? I say once you get a boat, it's hard to really like to bank fish as much just because being on a boat is so nice and magical. That being said, I do enjoy bank fishing for a lot of species, like shore casting for salmon. Amazing. That being said, if I could do it in a
stream
boat,
trout,
I'd rather do that in a boat
really well.
Yeah.
Not the streams around here.
There are a lot of situations where bank fishing has the advantage. When we go fishing for catfish and carp, obviously we're going to be fishing from shore because you can get in places that you couldn't even get a boat into.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, say, like bass fishing, sometimes, from shore access, you won't have as much access. You only have like, oh, there's this little area I can fish and then that's it. But when you're in a boat, you can fish so much more. You can just be like, oh, this area is done and just shoot through to the next spot and the next spot and the next spot and just keep fishing. And you can also get away from people, which is what I like. I like having a boat. And that was the main thing for me is like, I hate fishing with like 20,000 people because we live in the GTA and it's super populated. Any fishing spot is just pounded. So when you're in a boat, you can at least get away from the crowd and usually have a better chance at finding some less pressured fish.
Bank fishing, we're like steelhead. You're going to be fishing a creek or a river mouth. And I just think of places like the Ganaraska, which everyone knows about. Right?
There's hundreds of people fishing.
You look on that and you can't even see the water anymore. There's so many guys. Like that's absolutely ridiculous. So that, for me, has really turned me off of shore fishing especially for steelhead. I don't like going mid-season, or early season steelhead, because there's too many guys there. Like it is a bit of a turn.
It
loses a lot of joy for me to go at that time. So having the boat, I can go and just I'm going on my own.
Yeah, like we've had days where, like, for instance, we were going to go steelhead fishing and the creek was literally packed.
Yeah.
And we jumped in his boat and we went pike fishing. It was in April. And we're like, okay, pike's open in zone 17. So we went out pike fishing. We caught some pike. And everyone's like, why would you fish for pike when you could go steelhead fishing? Well, it's like we were the only ones on the lake and we caught fish. We had a fun day.
Yeah.
We got out in the boat and ripped around. But I mean, not everyone can afford a boat.
Yep.
So bank fishing is great too. And again, even though we live in the GTA and there's lots of fishing pressure, there are lots of places you can fish and catch fish. Mm-hmm. Just don't expect to find a lot of places where there's no one around.
Yeah.
When you live in one of the most highly populated areas in North America, that tends to happen. All right, here's an interesting question. Dawson Hoffman, he asks, if you had $1,000 to build a combo, what would it be? Now, generally speaking, I do own $1,000 combos. I own combos that cost more than that. But generally, I've come to the point where, for me, $500 to $600 combos are my sweet spot right now. And that may sound extremely high for you. Mm-hmm. I've been fishing for 20, almost 30 years, since I was like 4 or 5. But like I've been buying fishing equipment since I was like 12, 13. I used to save up my paper route money and buy $300 St. Croix when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it's an obsession. Again, we are not saying you need expensive combos, but for me, I found a $250 rod and a $250 reel.
Awesome.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, for $1,000, I know there's a bunch of gear junkies that listen. So for $1,000 for me, I would personally buy a Shimano Bantam baitcasting reel. That's a super heavy duty. It's a little bit heavier, just a powerhouse. It's such a classy looking baitcasting reel. That's about $550. And then with the other 500, I don't know. It's a hard choice. There's a lot of nice rods out there. I'd probably pick up something made in North America. So I'd probably pick up a St. Croix Legend X. You know that one, the pukey green one with the full cork handle?
Legend X are really nice.
Yeah. Now, is that the best $500 rod? Definitely not. But I just like the color, so I'm going to go with that. And it's a beautiful rod.
So for me, I'd probably go with Shimano Stella and then an Ugly Stick Elite.
Yeah. Well, you're over 1,000. You're over 1,000.
Yeah, I've never given much thought to the question just because I'm like, I don't have a desire to have a combo. Like,
no.
The only combo I'd ever have if I got into it would be center pin. Would cost so much just because I'd want like a good reel, and the reels cost.
The reels are like $600-$700 now. Yeah, we're just talking, again, I guess, for like bass and fishing. Walleye.
Yeah, like a nice high end like a Daiwa Steez, let's say, and then I'd couple that with maybe like a high end an Elite Series, like a Legend, like a Legend, or I might go try what's the Shimano NRX. No, they don't make those in Baitcaster, do they?
Well, it's Loomis, and those are like $800.
Yeah.
Andrew's overpriced. He's like, I'll just spend $1,600. It's fine.
It's like, nah, I'll just spend, $5 or $6. That's the perfect spot for me for like, I'm going to save up, buy something I know that I'm going to enjoy and like using.
Yeah.
And the extra 10% of benefit you get for spending twice that price, I'm like, it's not worth it to me.
Yeah. Again, we fish in small boats too. So if you have a nice cushy bass boat with a rod locker and that rod's safe all the time, that's one thing. If it's bouncing around in my canoe, I don't want an NRX Plus bouncing around in my canoe. I gotta sneak it in a front door every single time I go fishing and hope the screen door doesn't slam on it. I wouldn't spend personally, like, I'd rather have 2 $500 combos than one $1,000 combo. That's just myself. But anyway, we're gonna go into the next one. I'd love right now, I think a great combo that I would love to have would be a Tatula SV with a one of the new Mojo Bass. Yeah. Like, that's a sick combo for me. I'd 100%. Love that. And that's affordable for a lot of people. Yeah. All right, here's an interesting question. So this one guy, I can't even pronounce his name. He said, you just won the Lotto Max jackpot. What boat are you buying? Well, the answer, my friend, is several. I'll even buy one for you, sir. Depends how much money I won. So I looked it up, and I'm not into the whole bass boat thing. I'm not research for these questions. I'm just hearing them for the first time. It's true. I don't like fiberglass boats because I like to like just drive and hit stumps. I don't care. So I've always been a fan of Lund. Lund is like, for me, Lund is the deal. I'd like a Lund, and I would probably get a Lund Pro V, which is just like, it's not a bass boat, but it's like a pretty nice fishing boat, like a walleye, pike, bass boat, muskie. It comes in a bunch of different lengths, but I'd probably just get the smaller one, 18.5 foot. The smaller one. It goes all the way up to like 21. So 18.5 foot with a 200 horsepower on it. Yeah. That would be like my ideal, like, general dream boat. Now, if I was just like a billionaire, sure, I'd buy like a Bass Cat, sparkly, I was gonna say, purple. I would get a Bass Cat, but then completely overhaul it to customize it how I want. Yeah. I would like, all right, brand new boat. Let's gut this thing. Yeah. And I think I'd put on a Mercury saltwater motor. Just I want the big white, but I want like the 350s or whatever, where it just has it's the motor, the gear head that turns only, not the whole motor. That's like sick. I think too that I would buy a slightly bigger like boat that I could put on like bigger lakes, like Lake Simcoe and Lake Ontario, and I'd also buy a dually like F350 super cab, something that could actually tow it, not an Elantra. Yeah, true. But I think I'd buy something bigger that I could go on to like Simcoe, Bay of Quinte comfortably in. Mm-hmm. And then I'd also buy like an 18-foot John boat and then just custom build it just the way I want and have like a cool like jet drive motor on the back or something just weird. And then we'd get it wrapped that says the AOA machine. But
I would have, I kid you not, what I think would be amazing is down in, I saw it on Swamp People, that show Swamp People.
Oh yeah.
And down in the bayou, I'm like, I'm Troy Landry.
Whoa.
What, you haven't heard the guy speak?
Yeah, I have.
That was a perfect impression of him. Landry boys. So they had this motor, it was on like a John boat. And I can't remember the name of it. It's like a mud motor or something like that. And so it has a prop, but it actually sits, the bottom of the motor is actually level with the bottom of the John boat. And so it has this metal shroud that sits around the prop. So, and it's air-cooled motor. It's like a Honda style, right? It's air-cooled. Doesn't need any water intake.
So it can run through mud.
So you run this thing through mud and just like skipping on top and like, and it's still a prop. It's not a jet propulsion because you can't run that through mud. Right? It'll clog up the motor.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So with the prop, it's just like this shroud is around the prop. So the prop is maybe 3/4 of the way underwater and it doesn't sit any lower than the bottom of the boat. So they're like ripping this thing, and generally the boats have a small channel to allow some water to come up as well. And this thing runs in like literally nothing.
No water.
So imagine taking that and like
Just
ripping
going
it through. Like, all right, we're going to
Lake Scugog.
Lake Scugog. We're like, you can run that thing because it doesn't matter what you hit because literally you cannot bust the skeg off it. Like it doesn't stick down. So that would be one of mine that I'd buy just for fun because that you could take anywhere. That's the thing that you can easily like jump log jams with.
Nice. I was going to say, if we did win Lotto Max, which we wouldn't because we don't buy lottery tickets, we would probably stop doing this podcast and have a fishing show on TV that we would pay for ourselves. Anyway, let's
Watch
go on
out,
to
Fish in Canada.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I love you guys.
This is Fishing Ontario. This is an interesting question from some guy whose name I can't pronounce. Have you ever fly fished?
Yes.
Yes. Actually, I used to be the fly fishing guy at Sail for quite a while until I quit because I needed to make man money. We used to fly fish quite a
Sail as a
bit.
sponsor. I'm just kidding. We were never sponsored by them.
Oh, well. Yeah. Anyway, we used to fly fish quite a bit. I haven't for a few years. I think but probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I cracked out my one of my steelhead fly fishing combos and I went for a day and I caught a bunch of fish. And that was the first time I'd used it in like 5 years.
We used to fly fish pretty regularly for salmon too.
Yep. Salmon,
then,
steelhead, even a little bit bass.
Yeah.
We don't do it as much. We should really. Maybe this year when we go camping, we should bring our fly rods.
Yeah. Whenever I go to the cottage, I like to bring my fly rod because in the early morning I'll get up and at least like one morning I'll head out. There's a nice shoal I know of that I'll just like fly fish some woolly buggers on and get some smallmouth. And I'll catch like the biggest one there. I'll catch off that shoal is maybe 2 pounds, but
Still fun on a fly rod. Yeah.
And then last time I went out with that, I actually brought my 3-weight and was catching. I used a heavier tippet just because the smallmouth are like so aggressive.
Yeah.
But I have a 3-weight like eagle claw fly rod, and catching smallies on that was insane.
Fun. Yeah, fly fishing is fun. I got to the point when I was steelhead fishing where I find a lot of fly guys, fly anglers, guys and girls. They have this like weird snobbishness to them where they're like, oh, fly fishing is better. Like there are a lot of fly fishermen that don't think that, but there are a lot that do. And it gets to the point where like, just because I like trying all kinds of fishing, I was fly fishing and like indicator nymph fishing for steelhead. But then when you think about it logically, center pin fishing is more effective and more efficient than fly fishing.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So why would you do something that's more difficult?
But they have a passion.
It's
and a
more
love
enjoyable.
For it. It's its own experience above and beyond just going out to catch fish. Like
it's more effort.
Yeah.
Like even just the casting.
Yeah.
It's more effort.
Yeah.
But we do like fly fishing. We just kind of got out of it right now because like you're busy. You have to choose what you want to do, and fly fishing because it is more effort and
then
it's expensive.
Any wind is annoying. So the days that I can go out, I generally don't bring my fly rod because I'm like, the chance of me actually being able to use it when I'm on the water is
slim.
Yeah.
All right, here's an interesting question. This is from Earth Q Fishing, who is one of our regulars. He said, a beginner baitcaster combo, please. I always ask people when they ask me that, what's your budget?
Yeah.
But for baitcasting reels, I always recommend, it may sound expensive, try to spend at least $100 on a reel. Mm-hmm. At least. When I worked at the tackle shop, there's all kinds of different price points. I mean, you can spend, $100 $1,000 on a bait casting reel. You can also spend $40.
Yeah.
The one that's $40 is going to suck. And if you're just getting into bait casting gear, it's going to suck to cast it. And you're going to be like, this is terrible. I'm not good at this. It's like, no, you are probably fine. It's just that reel is terrible. If you spend at least 100, and really realistically, 150 is the sweet spot. Yep. You can buy for 150 a Shimano SLX. Amazing. You can buy a Daiwa Fuego. Amazing.
I still run a Fuego. I love that thing.
Tons of Abu reels, 13 fishing reels in that $150 range. If you can spend 100, I would definitely look at Abu. Abu Garcia seems to make the king of reels under $100.
I would also say Piscifun.
Piscifun, yeah.
They have some pretty good reels for
and
around that price range between $70 to $100 if you're on a tight budget. They run pretty good. A lot of good reviews. They've been around for quite a while now, and they work.
If you're not into buying random reels off Amazon, which I'm not really, but then go to your tackle shop and just ask them, hey, what's the best reel you got for $100?
Yeah.
And my advice would be look for sales. You can get some really good sales sometimes, especially at the end of summer when they're kind of like blowing out their stock from the summer. You can get some good reels sometimes. I noticed I was just at Gagnon Sports today, actually, just before the podcast, and they have a table with a bunch of 13 fishing reels that are like half price. It's like, okay, look at those. See if something can fit in your budget, or if not, just wait for a sale and at least don't pay the tax.
Yeah.
But
one of the things that it depends what your budget is. I had a friend, he wanted to get a bait caster because he was getting really frustrated with line twist. So he wanted to get a bait caster. So we got him, set him up with a Shimano SLX DC. Oh yeah. He had a decent budget. So we got a Shimano SLX DC, and then we got him a Shimano Sojourn rod, which was on sale, and we paid $15 for the rod.
Wow.
So
it's like a $300 reel and a $10 rod.
Yeah, so like the combo in total was like $300. And now but again, like with bait casting, put more money, I would recommend, into the reel. Yeah. You're going to have a much better time casting a higher quality reel on a cheap rod than you will a cheap reel on a high quality rod.
Definitely.
Your enjoyment in fishing will show that difference.
And for rods, again, pick up the rods at your tackle shop, see what feels good to you.
We tried a few
for about $100.
Yep, from 100 and below, and he picked up the Sojourn and was like, he wanted a softer tip because I was explaining, softer tip. If you're just doing cast and retrieve stuff, then you want something that has a bit of a softer tip. It's going to be easier to land the fish. He's just getting into it, so the most he's going to be doing is casting a chatterbait, casting a crankbait, all that stuff, a spinner bait. So for that, it's absolutely perfect.
Exactly. And I would also, like, for $100, like, there's tons of good rods, like Fenwick HMG. It's around $100. I've had tons of those over the years, still have them. Daiwa XT, the one we were talking about, the Daiwa XT.
Yeah.
They're $120. Amazing rods. Yeah. Highly recommend those. Yeah. But like Shimano Claris, like a lot of the 13 fishing rods you can get on a good deal. Like they blow them out for pretty cheap sometimes. So just... there's tons of options.
Yeah, the 13 rods, you can
I've
get them.
I've had a few of them. They're not bad.
Yeah, they go like 60% off sometimes.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question from Corey Reed. How do you guys feel about gobies in the Kawartha lakes? Good or bad? He doesn't mind it. Because they were in Lake Ontario, they're in the St. Lawrence, and they're kind of going up. You'd see them in Rice Lake now. Yes. And now they're going up into the Kawartha. They're in Pigeon now too.
Mm-hmm. I am not pro goby because they're an invasive species.
But I'm pro big bass.
At the same time,
I'm pro big fish.
You ask people who actually know their stuff about it, and the goby are not as bad as everyone said they were going to be to the environment, and they have been a big food source for fish in the area. So I don't really see it hurting too much, honestly, in the fishery. So I don't really have a strong opinion about it. I can't stop it. To me, it's like,
it is what it
is. They're there.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a fish biologist. I don't know.
Knowing that, I'll have a pack of goby baits on the boat, so I can match the hatch. Have what's out there. Yeah.
And again, I fished with this guy a few times on rice, and one of his main techniques that he uses now is goby baits. Yeah. And he's like, he's been fishing the lake for years. And he's like, I would have never done this before. He's like, but this works because there's gobies here and the smallmouth are really, feeding on them. So, if it means that there's going to be more bait fish or for food for all the feces, the species of fish, then I'm all for it. Again, I'm not a biologist. I don't know the long-term effects, but hey, again, what can you do?
Yeah.
I'm for it. I mean, if it means bigger fish, like look at the fish in the St. Lawrence. These big, small, they're hitting over 8 pounds now. Like they're getting huge because of gobies. That's
zebra mussels are worse than gobies, still in my opinion.
Yeah, because if you step on a zebra mussel, cut your foot open. If you step on a goby, it's just like ew.
Squish.
All right. Here's a funny one from Supernoof71. Have you guys fell out of the boat yet? Not
out
yet.
Of the boat? No. Out of the canoe?
Yeah,
yes.
A few times.
We told that story actually on our first or second podcast about
falling out of the canoe. We haven't fallen out of the boat. There's been a few, like, Andrew's boat isn't the most stable boat of all time, but it's decent.
So I figured it out because it's a flat bottom boat. I used to call it like a modified V, but it's not even a modified V. It's essentially a John boat that just comes to a point at the front instead of a square bow. So, but yeah, the hull itself is completely flat in its contact with the water. So what happens is it doesn't track very well, and then if I'm trying to cross a wake or there's big waves, what'll happen is if I'm trying to go up the wave, like the water has that suction on the bottom of the boat and actually just pull your boat down. It won't like lift off and cut through that wake to go over it.
Yeah.
So if I'm not attacking it directly head on, then it can just pull that boat right back down to the bottom, and then you're broadside on this wake. And it's pretty terrifying when you're not expecting it.
We hit a big wake last year.
So yeah, so I it was the first 2 trips in the boat I didn't know, right? And so thankfully we weren't going full clip. We were going pretty close, but
yeah.
And so yeah, after that it's like, okay, well now I know when I see a wake coming across, slow down, cross it, go back, fire again. So it's just we're trying to be smart about it so we don't fall in.
Hey, I don't mind falling in. I just don't want all my gear falling in, sinking to the bottom. All right. Here is an interesting question from Frederick. He says, how long do you fish a hole for steelhead before moving spots? We kind of covered this in our steelhead episode, which was like episode 6.
Nowadays, if you have a hole, never move.
Yeah. Ideally, I grew up steelhead fishing, so there are a lot of spots that I know are good and that I know are worth staying at. So if I get at one of those holes and I actually get it myself or with me and my buddy, we're probably going to stay there for a long time because there's probably going to be fish there. And even if they're not active, you can probably pick 1 or 2 off after a while of persistent trying different baits.
And steelhead, they're moving up too, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So if you're there for 6 hours, the fish have changed over 3 times.
Yeah. But even say like the water dropped and the fish aren't moving up, they're going to hole up in deep holes. So you might as well fish deep holes. That being said, sometimes it pays off to run and gun through spots and pick off small pockets.
If you see a single fish sometimes, everyone will pass it over because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to fish for that one. There's a higher odds for me to go to this hole that has 7 of them.
But they're pressured.
But they're pressured fish, whereas that one hasn't seen something all day. So don't overlook a fish.
And don't overlook small spots, like a little undercut bank or a little, pocket behind a rock. Yeah. Sometimes there'll be 1 or 2 fish behind there that are actually willing to bite. So again, it depends on the day. Sometimes you're just going to have to hunker down at a good hole. But if fish are moving and the water's nice and a little bit high, I would just run and gun myself.
Yeah.
So
if fish aren't moving and there's nothing in that hole, then obviously move as soon as possible.
Fall salmon tactics. And we have an episode coming up about salmon tactics, so we're not going to get too in depth about this. But if you could only have 1 lure, we're talking shore casting, what lure would you pick?
Little Cleo.
3/4 ounce Little Cleo. It would probably be either a Little Cleo for me or a J13 Rapala. Yeah. It's hard to beat, and literally, I've had so many people ask me over the years
too.
Basically a spoon, whatever spoon
anything
you like.
Heavy that casts well.
Yeah,
J13 work really well, but they're depending on the area you are, depending on how far you have to cast, that's where it would change for me. If I have to cast 60 feet, I'll use a J13. If I have to cast 80 feet, I'm using a Cleo.
Yeah, 100%. They do cast and fish deeper too.
Yeah,
but I've had people ask me like, how do you catch salmon? I've gone fishing, I haven't caught them. There are obviously a lot of variables, and experience will help you catch more fish of like retrieve speed and where to cast, what time to fish. But if you cast a Little Cleo or a J13 at a river mouth in a good spot, even if you have no experience, you eventually will hook one because the fish are just swimming around, and eventually one's going to intercept your lure and get mad at it and smack it. So I've had people that just get frustrated and they're like, I've been out and I haven't caught anything. Just keep going.
There are nights we go out, we don't catch anything.
There are nights we go out and catch 6. So like, it really depends on the day. And it really depends on the year. Some years are great. Some years are terrible.
Yep.
So we are going to get into that more. And if you want to know now, we do actually have a YouTube video all about shore fishing techniques on our YouTube channel, Average Ontario Anglers.
Yep.
The movie. Just kidding. All right. Here's a question too from Jacob. He says, do we think the salmon are going to be early or late this year? I think they're going to be a little late.
I think so too, just because
the summer was a little bit late.
Yeah.
I noticed the bass were spawning late.
Yeah.
And it wasn't super hot like early in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's getting hot. I feel like it won't be too late, but I feel like it might be a few weeks more than what it normally is.
Yeah.
But again, that could just be
it
the
depends.
ramblings of a crazy man.
Yeah. Just because summer's late too doesn't mean that summer can't stop early. Unfortunately, I don't want to be the guy that says that, but it is mainly dependent on how soon summer winds down as to when the salmon come in, I find. Because it's the water temperature dropping, big rain, they could all head in early.
Yeah. If you're watching this on YouTube, I would highly recommend, thanks for watching it on YouTube, but if you want to hear the really clean, edited version without the uhs and ums, listen to the actual podcast on Spotify or Apple because it is legit clean.
Yeah.
Speaking of that,
if we edited if Jesse edited the video the same way as a podcast, all of a sudden we'd be like clipping around and just like shooting back and forth. He'd miss like, where did the half second go and why is he wearing a different hat?
It's true. All right. I didn't ask this guy, but I'm just going to read this message that he sent me. I thought this could be our last thing. So there is a guy, I won't read it word for word, but there's this guy and he said, he messaged us on Instagram and he said that he wanted to say that he discovered our podcast a few weeks ago and he actually works for a radio station.
Cool.
So I was like, oh.
He's like, wow, you guys have faces for radio. I'm like,
yeah. And he says we're doing a good job, a professional job that's entertaining and easy to listen to.
Nice.
So I've actually got a few messages like this. Again, we've said in a few podcasts, like we tried to invest a lot into the equipment so that it sounded good. There's been a lot of podcasts that I've listened to that it's good information.
Content is awesome.
The audio is terrible. Yeah. And it's hard, like, especially ones that go over Zoom. It's just like, it's hard to listen to. So I'm glad that someone that actually works in radio is like, hey, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
He's probably like, it doesn't suck, but it's not terrible. But that's good. So anyway, his question is, he sent us this. He said, I started fishing about a month ago and have gotten hooked good. Hopefully not in the hand. That being said, a couple of days ago, I experienced my first lost lure. Ooh, I feel that.
Yep.
Cutting the line on that Mepps Black Fury hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for, which made me wonder if you guys could get back one lure, which one would it be? I thought that was a good question.
That's a really good question.
That's a good question.
I like that.
And then he said, just an idea of you guys doing an episode on clearing snags or lost lure equipment stories, which we will do in a future episode.
That's
some
good stories about retrieving stuff.
So what is one lure, Andrew, that you lost that you still think about to this day?
I know exactly.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Yeah. So this is a lure that I tried for a long time to purchase again. And this isn't something like, this is one I had in my tackle box for years, and it was the Blue Fox and Rapala. They're owned by the same company, right? And it's the minnow spin.
I know where
you can't buy them in Canada. You can't. Like, I've never seen them in stores. I did a bunch of research on it. So I had this orange one. It was just like orange with like a yellow belly.
Yep.
And an orange blade. And this thing was my lure where if the fish aren't biting, I cast this thing out and I would catch. Like, this was my confidence bait.
Yeah.
And it saw me through like dozens and dozens of trips to the cottage, camping, growing up. I loved that thing. Always with me. And I was fishing Lake Simcoe. I was wading out onto a sunken pier that was near my house. So I'd wade out onto it and was casting around. And also when I had a big strike, I set the hook. And this big small, I know it was like a 4 or 5 pound smallmouth. And I'll tell you why I know it was that size. So I set the hook into it and it swims down and it swims under a log that's coated in zebra mussels. Line snaps. Gone. And I'm like, oh. Like, it just, my heart sank. Like, that was terrible because I loved that bait. I had my goggles with me because I would go swimming at the lake. And I was looking around and I was swimming around the sunken pier, seeing maybe like the fish spat it out or something like that. Oh, I can find it. And I look under a log and I see this big smallmouth with this minnow spin hanging out of its mouth. and there wasn't enough line. I tried to like reach for it and grab it, but it just like swam away and never saw it again.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find any around. I looked online, looked like searching back into we'd look at the Bass Pro catalogs and like call each other about it. Like, I was looking through everything, couldn't find these things. And I ordered, I think I asked you, I think you got like 2 of them, but I had to order like 30 of them in order to get it shipped to Canada.
At the time.
Yeah. So because it had to be like a certain value before they'd even ship it up. So I bought 30 of these minnow spins and none of them have worked. Like I've caught like the odd fish on it, but like none of them worked like that one specific bait. And it was something about the wood that it is carved out of or something that gave it a weird like keel. I don't know what, but that was like an amazing lure and I wish I could have that back.
Yeah. I remember that. That's a sad story. Thanks for leaving us with this sadness.
Well, what about yours?
Okay, so
he asked a depressing question. Like, it's a really good question, but it's like, oh, that one thing you lost. What was it? It's like, it's gonna be a sad story.
Thanks, Ben, for this question. Now we're sad.
You're just like that one plastic bead. I
was fishing this valuable 8-cent bead at the creek, and I snagged a lot. I'd have to say one that stands out to me, and it wasn't really a valuable lure or something that was, a value to me. Like we all have like lures our dad or grandpa passed down to us. It wasn't something like that. But back when I was really young, YouTube wasn't around. So the only way you got fishing information was fishing magazines. I had a subscription to a lot of them, like Ontario Outdoors and Outdoor Canada and Field and Stream, and there's fishing books, right? So one of the lures that they always recommended for pike and muskie was the Mepps Muskie Killer, just like the number 5, Black Fury with the double hooked, bucktail on the back. And at the time I was young, I was like 13, right? And I saved up my allowance and I bought this and it was like, $15. At the time, that was a lot of money. I was like 12 or 15 or 13 years old, right? Yeah. And I wasn't used to casting lures that weighed that much because I only fished small lures. And I casted it down at this harbor I used to live, down by where I used to live. And my first cast, it went across the bay and went right into a tree. On my first cast, and he was like way up in the tree, and I was just like, I wasn't expecting it to cast that far because it was heavy, right? And I literally was trying to pull it, and it snapped, and it's probably still up there right now, literally like 20 years later. But I was so mad. I was like, because I had saved up my allowance for like forever, and it was just dangling. I could see it in the tree. I was so mad, but that's one story. But it still makes me mad.
Do we have time for another story time though?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
What is it?
Well, you saying how you snagged a tree across the river.
The channel story? All right. You have 1 minute.
Okay. So I was fishing. I'll say where it is because I don't care. It's Beaverton Pier.
Yeah.
I used to live up in Beaverton and I had purchased a Cast King spoon. Were you with me? I think you were.
Yeah. Which is literally essentially, if you don't know what a casting spoon is, it is literally a hunk of metal with a hook on it.
Yeah. It's designed to cast far. It's called the Cast King.
Yeah.
So I had this thing on my spinning rod and I whip it out across. I'm fishing on the pier, fishing across the channel. And I get this thing like 30 feet up in a tree.
Yeah.
And I'm yanking it and I'm using 30-pound braid and a spinning rod and I'm trying to like pull it out of the tree and all of a sudden this like super yacht thing is coming in up the pier.
It's like
and it's like, again, this line's going to be taking this guy's neck off when he drives through it. And I'm just yanking on this thing so hard trying to get it unstuck. The tree's like bending over and I'm trying to like snap the line. I didn't have a knife on me.
Yeah.
So yeah, eventually I just tightened the drag, wrapped like the line around my hand and just kind of like ran back with it. Until like the tree like flexed and then just like the line just like snapped.
Yeah.
Probably like, I swear, like a foot in front of this boat before I started hitting it.
Just in the nick of time.
Like, you idiot. I'm like, ooh.
And we never casted a Cast King again. Or what is it called? A Cast King?
Cast King.
Yeah. It's the kind of lure that if I was trying to break
a
record for casting the most distance, I'd use a Cast King.
All I use it for now is jigging for ice fishing.
Yeah. It's actually
tip him in one. I was like, shoot straight down. I'm like, perfect.
Actually, it's one of my favorite jigging spoons is a small Cast King. But anyway, I thought this episode was pretty cool. We didn't get to all the questions. There was literally like 35 or 40 of them by the time I looked at this, but we'll do another Q&A soon.
Yeah.
But just to give you some AOA news before we end, again, we record these about 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time. So this may be a little outdated or who knows. But we do in the next month in August, me and Andrew are going away on a camping trip to Algonquin.
Yep.
So we're pretty excited about that. And we're going to be targeting a bunch of different species of fish. So we're excited about that. We have a few weekend fishing trips. Actually, this weekend we're going camping and fishing 3 lakes in 2 days. So we're going to make a little video of that. Hopefully by the time this airs, around that time, we'll probably put the video up. So we're really excited about that as well. We just passed 20,000 downloads on our podcast. That's not awesome. Counting YouTube.
That's really good.
As of July 20, what is it? The 28th, 27th. We just passed 20,000 downloads, which is amazing. And we have 5 episodes now with over 1,000 downloads each. That's pretty good. Sick. Yeah. So we'd like to thank everyone for the support again. We'd also like to thank, we have a few Patreon members now. And I've had a few people say, you know, I like the giveaways, but, you know, I'm from the States or I'm from the different provinces and I can't do these giveaways. We apologize. Right now, it is very hard. Mm-hmm. Again, we're not making any money off this podcast.
Right now, the giveaways are Canada-wide, I believe.
Nope, they're Ontario only.
Oh, they're Ontario. Okay. Yeah.
That is going to change. You have to understand, unfortunately, things are expensive and shipping to the States is very bad and shipping across Canada is very bad. So we're going to be working with our sponsors. So far throughout this whole 6 months that we've had the podcast, we haven't made any money from our sponsors. Yeah. They're just giving away prizes. Yep. So tacking on extra shipping expenses, it's hard too. So we are going to be changing that next year for sponsors and we will be shipping Canada-wide. That will be one of the requirements and possibly in the future the States. But for helping us cover some of the expenses for editing and uploading and all the equipment that we're using, there are a few people that are supporting us on Patreon. Yeah. Again, not required, but thank you. You know who you are. We do appreciate it because we actually do have to pay for this out of our pocket every month. So we do appreciate it. We do appreciate all the messages we get too. We get tons of messages on our Instagram. Every week, people are like, I love the podcast, just found it. I recommended it to my friends. That's amazing. The more of a following we can get, the bigger the sponsors we can get and the farther we can ship. So we do appreciate it. This podcast only happens because you guys listen to it. So we do appreciate that. So this was episode 23. Episode 24. Ooh, it's a good one. We actually have a guest coming up too. It's not episode 24. I think it's episode 25.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the guest.
Why don't we very briefly talk about the next few episodes?
Okay.
So not in any particular order, but in August, we are going to be talking about, well, you talked about the one with our guest.
So with our guest, it's going to be camping and fishing while camping. And not just, it's going to be primarily interior camping. Yep. So not car camping, but taking a boat in or hiking into a lake or something like that.
And what is our guest going to be talking about?
He's going to be talking about the camping side of it because he is an avid camper.
Yeah, he makes us look like rookies.
Yeah.
The guy packs in like one bag.
And it was like, like, oh, we packed light this time. We only brought 2 coolers.
And he makes a mean brisket.
Oh,
yeah. So we're going to be talking about food too because he's a foodie. Yeah. So that's one episode coming.
Yeah, because we were blown away because we just have never thought of, you know, the way he like cooks meat before, bringing in all that stuff, like the way he was eating brisket and ribs and stuff like that. And like for us to get so much work to try and do it in the campsite, he showed us like dead easy to eat that stuff while camping. We're like, okay, we've been sleeping on this.
He's like eating a 3-course meal by the time Andrew's half opened a can of chili.
Yeah, I'm like, these sidekicks are tasty.
We'll get into that more. Another episode coming up is we're actually going to talk a little bit about Andrew's boat build. I've had a lot of people ask about that.
14-foot tinner from rags to not so nice to a little bit nicer rags.
A fishable rag boat. And then towards the end of August, we're actually going to have an episode fully about shore casting for salmon. And then the next week, we're going to do one about creek fishing for salmon, which is going to be really cool because that's a topic we really like. Something that in our locality here is very popular. So we're excited about that. Again, we thank you for all listening and we are going to sign off now. So Andrew, what is the advice of the day?
Advice of the day?
Of the week.
Of the week. Oh, well, that's a lot more pressure. So, I would say watch the weather and don't get caught in a seiche.